listen-only mode.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Diane DiBasella, and I'm the director of the Fiscal Sponsorship Program here at Fractured Atlas. Before I jump into the presentation, I just wanted to make sure that everybody can hear me. I am recording the session, so if you miss anything along the way, you will be able to receive an emailed version of the recording later on. So I'm happy to send that out to everybody. There's no need to ask for it. I'll just automatically email that to you in the next couple of days. So I want to make sure the sound is okay. If anybody can just use the question functionality on the right-hand side of the screen to just let me know that the sound is okay, that would be really great. If you could just say, yes, the sound is good, great. Thanks a lot. All right, well, thank you so much for joining the webinar tonight. We really appreciate new and prospective members taking the time out of their schedules to learn about our programs and services. Members who are proactively learning about our fiscal sponsorship policies and procedures definitely have an easier time using our program to raise money. So, that's why we're here tonight, is to tell you a little bit about the fiscal sponsorship program. I will be available at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you have. So to just jump right in, let's get started with why you're here. So likely you have a great idea to create an artistic project. Maybe you're a filmmaker and you're working on some sort of passion project, or you're a choreographer and you're trying to start a new dance company. Perhaps you're a visual artist and you're looking to create some sort of major installation piece. Or you're an educator and you want to start training the next generation of artists. You're probably either trying to create an artistic product, or you're trying to you're trying to provide an artistic service. Usually it's one or the other. Sometimes projects come to us and they're doing a combination of both, which is also okay. You're likely not sure how you're going to pay for it, which is why you're joining the webinar tonight. And what we try to share with projects that are new to the program and coming aboard is that there are different ways to fund artistic projects. The first is you can pay for your artistic expenses yourself. So if you were able to create your art entirely out of pocket, you likely wouldn't be here tonight on the webinar. If this describes you, feel free to leave this call at any time, because every other artist in America probably wishes that they were in your situation. The second is you get other people to pay for it. So perhaps you sell a product or some type of service to them. Perhaps you're teaching them something. Or you have them invest in your project and you offer them a share of the profit in exchange for them giving you money up front. It's sometimes common within the film world and the theater world for people to follow this type of model of investors, but it's not really that common to finance through investment unless you already have those connections, or you're sort of connected in that world already. It is rare, though, to fund a project entirely by investments alone. And then the last way to raise money for an artistic project is to seek charitable nonprofit sources of support. And this can be by asking your individual friends and family to give you money, by getting sponsorships from businesses that are interested in supporting charities. You can apply for grants from foundations or from government sources. And this model differs from the for-profit scenario in that individuals and businesses and foundations are supporting your work out of the kindness of their hearts because they believe in you and the work that you're producing, or they're really passionate about the impact that you're trying to make in your community and within your audience. So the large majority of these types of donations in the United States are typically made to nonprofit entities that have been given nonprofit status, which is referred to as 501c3 charitable status by the IRS. So in this webinar, what we're going to talk about is how you can ask for donations from individuals or grants from foundations without actually having to get your own 501c3 status. It's likely that your closest family members will make a small contribution. This is one of the largest pool of donors that we see at Fractured Atlas, is our project's friends and families. And there are certainly some foundations that award grants to individual artists and to small organizations or small groups or collectives that are putting on work together. If you've done any fundraising before, you likely know that being able to offer individuals tax deductibility in exchange for their contribution can be a major incentive in getting donors to open up their wallets. It's something that a lot of people in the United States, they budget a certain amount each year to give to charity. So if you are fiscally sponsored by Fractured Atlas, you could be the charity that they are choosing, or your project, sorry, could be the charity that they are choosing to give to. And there are definitely institutions that award grants and fellowships to individuals and arts collectives, but you'll find that many more corporations and foundations will only support organizations that have 501c3 status, which is why Fractured Atlas's fiscal sponsorship program exists. So if you are somebody who's considering applying for your own 501c3 status, it is definitely a serious step to take. If your annual operating budget is greater than $50,000 a year, you can definitely find that it can be expensive to operate a 501c3. It can be a time-consuming process to set up. It can be expensive in that you'll likely need assistance from an attorney, and you'll need to stay up to date with state filing registrations for charitable solicitations. It can also be time-consuming in that it can sometimes take a long time from the moment you decide to form an arts organization to the moment where the IRS finally declares that you're a 501c3 organization. So there's different ways to get your 501c3 status, but the reason that fiscal sponsorship exists is because 501c3 status is not necessarily the best fit for everybody. So, for example, let's say that you're an individual photographer and you're trying to fundraise to support your next exhibition. Or you're not 100% sure that you've got a viable idea yet. Maybe you're a new theater company that wants to see if there's a demand in your community for the work that you're producing, but you want to know that before you commit to forming a 501c3 organization. Or your project isn't exclusively a charitable enterprise. Perhaps you're a filmmaker and you are hoping to shop around your project to commercial distributors after it's done, but you also want to use donations and charitable gifts to actually start production on your film. So that's why Fractured Atlas is here. We're here to help in those types of situations. So before I get much further, I just wanted to say that it's nice to virtually meet you all. This is our fiscal sponsorship team at Fractured Atlas. My picture is at the top in the center. I'm Diane DiBasella. I'm the program director for the fiscal sponsorship program here at Fractured Atlas. To my left is Lauren, who is a program associate. Below Lauren is Teresa, who is a program specialist in fiscal sponsorship. Below me in the center is Courtney, who is a member advisor at Fractured Atlas. To the right of Courtney is Aisha, who is a program associate, and above Aisha, to my right, is Nathan, who is a program specialist at Fractured Atlas. So I just wanted to show you the team in case you do get fiscal sponsorship with Fractured Atlas. You could be dealing with any one of us at any point in time. We also work closely with two other staff members, Sabrina and Kat, who are membership associates at Fractured Atlas, and can answer a ton of questions as they come up for you. Just a tiny bit about myself. I've been working at Fractured Atlas for the last 10 years, and my focus has been on helping artists raise as much money as possible for their creative projects. In the time that I've worked at Fractured Atlas, I have helped oversee projects raising and spending over $75 million on their creative work. It's a really rewarding place to work, and all of the team members in the fiscal sponsorship program, we are all artists ourselves. So we've been there and the majority of us have also done some fundraising for our own artistic projects, so we know what it's like. So a little bit just about Fractured Atlas in case you're not familiar with us. We are a nonprofit technology company, and we work to help support artists by providing online business tools to them. This is really so that you can spend more time focusing on what's important, which is obviously creating your art. And to that end, fiscal sponsorship eliminates an important hurdle to fundraising, which is forming a 501c3 organization. With our fiscal sponsorship program, we extend some of the benefits of our 501c3 status so that you as an artist or an arts organization can solicit tax-deductible donations from individuals, from corporate sponsorship, and grants from foundations, which would typically only otherwise be available to nonprofits. So that's what we're here to do. So fiscal sponsorship is a great option if you are, again, an individual artist that you're trying to seek support for your art practice. If you are a new or a small arts organization that wants a training wheels period before deciding if you want to pursue your own nonprofit status, or if you're a for-profit arts enterprise that wants to seek both investors who plan to share in your profits, and you also want to solicit nonprofit donors who want to make a tax-deductible donation. So fiscal sponsorship is appropriate for all of those different types of work. I also just want to add to that as well. I said organizations as the second one, or a newer small arts organization. You also don't have to be formalized as a company. So if you as an individual artist are trying to start a dance company, that's okay. We can fiscally sponsor that dance company even if it doesn't have the legal status as a company. So the way that fiscal sponsorship works is that a donor or an institution makes their contribution directly to the 501c3 organization. So in our case, a donor who wanted to support your work would make a credit card donation on our website, or they would write a check out to Fractured Atlas, and that would come to us. We then issue the donor a tax receipt, and we hold the donation in a fund that's restricted specifically to the purposes of your work. You then can request the funds from us, and we disperse them to you in the form of a grant. So technically, when we give you the money that has come in for the purposes of your work, when we give it to you, it's in the form of a grant. So Fractured Atlas is making a grant to your artistic practice or to your artistic organization, however that form is designed by you. So there are many organizations in the country that offer fiscal sponsorship as a service. If you're shopping around and you're trying to figure out one that is a good fit for you, I just want to give you a few things to keep in mind if you are looking around. The first is that every fiscal sponsor is going to charge an administrative fee on donations that they process for the purposes of your work. Fractured Atlas's fee is 7%. Most fiscal sponsors are going to charge somewhere between 5 and 10%. Our fee covers all costs associated with administering your sponsored fund. So that includes our staff time, our website, our bank fees, our credit card processing fees. All of those fees are wound up into that 7%. So we don't ever charge you additional. There are occasionally you might find, let's say, a friend who has a 501c3 organization, and they'll say to you, "Oh, I'll happily fiscally sponsor your project with my 501c3." If you are going to do this with somebody, make sure that you have a written agreement with them that outlines who owns what and how the money is going to be handled. It's incredibly important for them while operating a 501c3, and for you if you are soliciting donations to go to their organization. The fee at Fractured Atlas is tiered so that the more money you raise, the lower the fee goes. So the fee remains at 7% for all check donations, for all credit card donations. And that is because with credit cards, we do have credit card fees that are part of that 7%. But if you receive checks and you have raised a total of more than $150,000 since you've been at Fractured Atlas, the fee drops to 6% for any checks received after that. If you raise above $500,000 for check donations after that, the fee drops to 5%, and above $1 million, the fee drops to 4%. We have currently almost 4,000 projects in the fiscal sponsorship program, and about 50 of them have the lower fee. So that gives you an idea of how many projects are raising more than $150,000 through our program. We found that our 7% administrative fee actually represents a discount for most people that are interested in forming a small nonprofit organization. So unless you have dedicated accounting staff in place or you have automated systems to help you keep track of your income and your expenses, the cost of maintaining a 501c3 with the IRS can often eat up more than 7% of your contributed income, which is, again, why fiscal sponsorship exists. Another thing to keep in mind if you're evaluating potential fiscal sponsors is that all of them are going to maintain some level of oversight with regards to how you solicit donations and how your donated funds are used. This is just standard for fiscal sponsors. So what this means when it comes to your fundraising activities is that we will want to review and sign off on your written donor solicitation materials. This includes if you're writing an individual appeal letter, if you're sending out a newsletter where you're asking for donations, if you have a donation page on your website, if you are doing a crowdfunding campaign, anything that mentions Fractured Atlas or promises tax deductibility to your donors, we would like to see before you send it out to your potential donors. We also have a partnership with Indiegogo, which enables you to use their crowdfunding platform to raise tax-deductible donations. Before your campaigns launch on Indiegogo, we will review them and we will provide feedback on how to make them as strong as possible. We really want you to succeed, so part of this review process is us also giving you feedback about your materials as you are putting them out into the world. Our partnership with Indiegogo at this point in time is going to be winding down by the end of the year. So we are planning on replacing the option to crowdfund on Indiegogo with an option coming directly from Fractured Atlas. So stay tuned for more information on that. We will have crowdfunding tools for you to use through Fractured Atlas directly in the coming months, which is really exciting. We're really excited to share that with everybody. If you are applying for grants as a fiscally sponsored project, we are involved in the process from start to finish. So we will review all of your grant materials prior to them to being submitted to a funder, and we're going to give you feedback on how to make them better. So if your budget doesn't make sense, we're going to go through it with you and say, these are a couple of things that you could do to change this and make it more clear to the funder what you're doing. If you have written a 5-page proposal, we will read it before you send it to the funder and give you feedback to say, you spelled 3 words wrong, you didn't answer one of the questions that the funder asked. We will, go through it. We don't copy edit, but we will give you that level of feedback so that you know what exactly is happening before, or do you know what to update before you send it to the funder. You'll also, as you decide which fiscal sponsor to go with, want to be clear about who owns the work that you produce while you're fiscally sponsored. So this, as I mentioned earlier, you should always have a written agreement with your fiscal sponsor so you outline who owns what. With Fractured Atlas, you maintain ownership over the work. But if you decide to enter a for-profit agreement, let's say you're a filmmaker and you are entering into a distribution deal with the Weinstein Company, what we will ask is that you show us that distribution agreement prior to actually signing it. So that's the only restriction we have on projects that are raising money through investors or through commercial distributors or purchasers. We try to make the process to release the donations your project receives as easy as possible. So anytime you need the funds, all you have to do is go to our website and you log on to the website and you submit what we call an online fund release request. And this is really just a form detailing to us what you're going to be spending the money on. It will ask if you're spending it on artist fees, if you're paying yourself, if you are renting a space, if you are using the money to travel somewhere for a conference, whatever it is, we just need to know the details of it. If you request more than $5,000, we will ask you to provide documentation for those expenses. So we will ask you for receipts or quotes, invoices, contracts, whatever it is that you might have that can show us that that's actually what you're going to be spending the money on. This is something we request not only for our oversight purposes, because as a charity, we need to be able to show the IRS that you're spending this money on artistic activities. But we also require this because you're going to need those receipts at tax time. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. And the next slide, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. Sorry, I jumped ahead. But at the beginning of each year, we're going to ask you to report back the activities from the last year. So we have something on our website called the annual report. And basically, it's a really brief form that asks you to tell us about what you accomplished in the last year, how you spent the money that you received and raised, and what you plan to do in the following year. We have thousands of projects each year complete the annual report, and some of them say it takes them 5 minutes, some of them say it takes them an hour. It's really up to you to keep track of your records and to know how to articulate really what you did and what you plan to do. We're not looking for a novel. We're really just looking for the basics of, I had 3 shows in the coming year. We are focused on workshopping a new piece, something like that. So as I mentioned 2 slides ago, if you are entering into a fiscal sponsorship agreement with any organization, it's important to remember that there are tax implications for you or for your company. So when we release the money from Fractured Atlas, it is technically in the form of a grant, and I mentioned that earlier. So anytime anyone, including a company, receives a grant in the United States, they must report it on their taxes. So grants are considered taxable income for you. If you get a grant, it's taxable income and you have to pay money. You have to pay taxes on that. So we ask that you plan accordingly when you are releasing funds from Fractured Atlas. If you need help with this, we can recommend accountants that are familiar with fiscal sponsorship. And we also provide an information sheet on fiscal sponsorship and your taxes that you can share with your accountant. The important thing to keep in mind is if you are releasing money from Fractured Atlas, so let's say you release $10,000 for your work, and $8,000 of that is to pay for the theater, it's to pay for film, it's to pay for some sort of artistic materials, whatever it is, it's not your own compensation. But the last $2,000 you are using to pay yourself. In most situations, and I'm not an accountant and everybody's individual tax situation is different, but in most situations, the only funds that you should end up owing taxes on is the $2,000 that you paid to yourself for your compensation. You should be able to offset the other $8,000 as business expenses. So that's the sort of like typical model of how our projects are operating when they get that kind of money. Because we do have projects sometimes in a given year that are releasing $100,000. And if you're doing that on your individual taxes, you definitely need to know what that means for you and how you're going to file your taxes. So again, we have accountants we can recommend that can talk to you more in depth about that. At the time that you apply for fiscal sponsorship, you'll digitally sign our fiscal sponsorship agreement. So please make sure to read it before you sign it. It is the fiscal sponsorship grant agreement where you're agreeing to the terms and conditions of our relationship. If for some reason you need to have 2 fiscal sponsors, we do not have a problem with that, and we do ask that you check with the other fiscal sponsor to make sure that that's okay with them. So often when I mention it's okay to have 2 fiscal sponsors, people will ask me why. Should I have 2 fiscal sponsors? The only reason really to have a second fiscal sponsor is if you are located someplace geographically that a specific funder will only allow money to go to a 501c3 in your area. So for example, there is a grant maker in the Bay Area who will not fund fiscally sponsored projects of Fractured Atlas because we are located in New York. They will only send the grant funds to a fiscal sponsor in the Bay Area. So we have projects that have a local fiscal sponsor in San Francisco just for that one grant, and then they use us for the rest of their fundraising. So that's a typical situation why somebody might have two fiscal sponsors. The fiscal sponsorship application and the agreement can be found on our website. If you go under Programs and Services and click on Fiscal Sponsorship, you'll be able to find it from there. So these are the steps to getting fiscal sponsorship. It's pretty straightforward and simple. First, you do have to be a member of Fractured Atlas. And you have to be a member at one of the dues-paying levels of membership. So that's either the professional or the organizational level. The professional level of membership gives you access to one person having a username and password on our website. And that also means only one person can contact us regarding the project. That level is $10 per month. If you wanted to have more users on the account, so let's say there's 3 of you that are going to be contacting Fractured Atlas to talk about different grants, to talk about different opportunities, and you want to have 3 user accounts, so that's 3 usernames and passwords, you would have the organizational level, which is $20 per month. So those are the only 2 levels of membership that have access to the fiscal sponsorship program. If you sign up at the community level, which is the free level, you will not have access to the fiscal sponsorship application, and you'll be told that you have to upgrade to either the professional or the organizational level. So just keep that in mind if you're poking around on our website. The most important parts of the fiscal sponsorship application include the artistic component. So this is what we call the project description, where you're basically telling us what the mission of your project is. When we use the term project, that really encompasses everything. So there are a couple different scenarios that people think, oh, well, I am not just a project, I'm an organization. Or I'm not just a project, I'm an artist with ongoing activities. That is okay. We just use the language project to describe everything. So you can be an individual artist. So let's say I'm a photographer, which I actually am a photographer, and I want to get sponsorship for my ongoing artistic practice. And this includes, shooting on a regular basis, exhibitions that I'm doing, a book that I'm putting together, some lectures that I'm giving. All of this is part of my artistic practice. I can get a fiscally sponsored project for all of that, and I could call it Diane DiBasella Projects. Or if you are a collective of artists and you're trying to form a music ensemble, and you don't have any sort of like formal structure. You're not an LLC and you're not a corporation, but the 3 of you are going to be working together to perform on a regular basis. You can get fiscal sponsorship for the ensemble. You don't have to say it's just for one performance or for one specific activity. I typically recommend that everybody apply and try to think in terms of ongoing activities rather than a one-time project. If you're only doing a one-time project and that's all you're planning on doing, that's fine. But if you are, if it's possible that you could be producing 3 different films or having any sort of ongoing activities, try to think of it in terms of a mission statement and really who is involved, what it is going to be, and how you're going to do it. That's really all of the information we need for the project description. The second part of the requirement for the fiscal sponsorship program is that there is a public benefit. So this is where we want to learn about your audience and who is going to experience the work. Public benefit really means that there is somebody other than you that is benefiting from the creation of this work. So if you are alone at home in your studio making art that you're never going to show to anybody, you are not appropriate for the fiscal sponsorship program. But if you are an artist who is planning on showing your work in public in some way, that is what we are looking for. We just want to know what you plan to do with the art once it's created. So once again, the two most important parts of the fiscal sponsorship application are the artistic component. We just need to know that it's artistic, and the public benefit. We just need to know who your audience is. A couple of other questions in the application, which are not as important to us. We're not judging them, and we won't. And how you answer them won't disqualify you from the program. So those include, there's a basic budget form where we ask you where you plan to have your money come from and how you plan to spend it. Again, we're not judging you on where you plan on spending it or where you plan to have it come from. We just want to know that you've thought this through. We also will ask if you have any outside investors who are involved. So is there somebody else who is going to own a share of your work or who is going to give money with an expectation of a return? That is different than a donor. A donor is somebody who gives with no expectation of getting anything in return. It is absolutely okay for our projects to have investors, but we just need to know this before we can approve your project. There are a few other questions in the application, but it should only take you about 20, maybe 30 minutes to complete. All of the applications that we receive for the fiscal sponsorship program are reviewed on an ongoing basis. So our board of directors reviews them on an ongoing basis, and you will receive a response within 1 to 2 weeks of submitting your application. There are some rare situations where it can take a little bit longer, but we'll let you know immediately if there's a chance of that happening. Usually, the reason it might take a little bit longer is that either the artistic component or the public benefit component is not clear in your application. So those are really where you want to focus most of your time. So before I open up for questions, I just wanted to quickly share the other programs and services that we offer to artists at Fractured Atlas. The first one that I just really briefly want to mention is called Artfully. Artfully is a ticketing software and a customer management software. And what it does is it allows you to sell tickets to your patrons and also manage their information. So if you have, 500 people that are part of your audience, you can put all of their information into Artfully, and you can track the relationships they have with each other. You can track who has attended your events or who has donated to you. You can connect it to MailChimp, so you can easily import and export this information in and out of MailChimp. You can actually track, when was the last time you called somebody, when was the last time you sent them an invitation to a show. It's really a system that helps you to just manage the people that you are having relationships with. It's free to use. Let me reframe that. The CRM functionality, the customer management functionality, is free to use. If you do decide to use the ticketing functionality to sell tickets, there are ticketing fees that are part of that sales process. Another program at Fractured Atlas is called Space Finder. Space Finder is an online marketplace that matches renters to venues based on their unique needs. So for example, Space Finder allows you to have a customizable search for space. So if you're looking for a rehearsal space or a screening space or studio art space, you can use the Space Finder tool to see if there's space like that in your community. There are also venues with synced calendars, so you can actually see if they're available for the dates that you're looking for. And some of the venues also that you find will let you pay through the listing and reserve the space, which can be really attractive if you're trying to book something quickly. There are various locations for Space Finder. So Space Finder is in New York City, Los Angeles, San Francisco. It's in the entire state of Minnesota. It's in Philadelphia. It is in about 10 other cities and geographic areas around the United States. So you can check on our website if you wanted to know if it's available in your community. And lastly, the only other program I wanted to quickly mention is our insurance program. Our insurance program is focused on business insurance. So that is if you are, for example, if you're renting a space and the space says to you, you have to have insurance in order for us to rent this to you. we can help you get liability insurance. If you are renting equipment and whoever you're renting the equipment from says to you, you have to have this equipment insured, we can help you get access to equipment insurance. If you are a filmmaker and you're looking to get errors and omissions or E&O insurance, we can help you get that. There's a whole different variety of insurance packages that we offer. And the great thing about our insurance program is that our goal is to get you the lowest cost insurance and the least amount of insurance that you need. So, most of the time insurance companies are typically trying to upsell you. They're trying to get you to buy more. Our goal is to match you with the least amount of insurance that you possibly could need to be protected. Our insurance team are also all artists. They've been there making work. And 2 of them are also licensed insurance brokers. So if you don't understand the language or you need help really understanding that world of insurance, they are happy to help you navigate that. So I am happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I see that there is one that has come in. But before I start answering the questions, I just wanted to thank you all for attending the webinar tonight. I hope that the information was helpful to you. We do offer a number of different webinars throughout the month. They are typically either at 2 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday and Thursday afternoon, or at 7 p.m. Tuesday evenings Eastern Time. We do record all of them, so if you miss any of them, feel free to email us or to look on our website in our knowledge base to find the recording of the most recent webinar. These are all posted on our website, so you can really watch them at any time at your own pace. If you have any questions related to fiscal sponsorship or our other programs and services, please do email us at support@fracturedatlas.org. It's the best way to reach us, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So with that, if anybody, I am going to stay to answer questions, but if anybody needs to leave, I understand, and I will send you a copy of the recording later on this week. So thank you so much for attending. And let me get to some of these questions. So somebody asked, does Fractured Atlas fiscally sponsor LLCs? Yes, we do fiscally sponsor LLCs. We are able to do this because most LLCs that we are sponsoring are acting as if they are a nonprofit budget-wise. So what that means is there are no members of the LLC who are individually profiting from the creation of the work. So for example, if the budget for the annual operating budget for your LLC is $250,000 a year, and let's say at the end of the year, you have paid out all of your expenses, the salaries of the people involved with the LLC, and you have a $50,000 surplus. You can't take that money and just share it as profit with the members of the LLC. You would actually need to take that money and reinvest it in the future work of the LLC. So, if at that point in time you hadn't paid yourselves, definitely compensate yourself for your time, but it can't just be above and beyond what you've budgeted for as salaries for the year. It would need to go back towards expenses related to ongoing activities. I hope that answers your question about the LLC. The next question is, what is taxed when an artist collective receives fiscally sponsored funds versus when an artist collective receives funds as a nonprofit? So if you are an artist collective that is fiscally sponsored and you receive funds, it is grant money to you, and you will need to talk to your accountant about how to handle that. Technically, you should be able to offset your expenses that are unrelated to your personal compensation. If you are a 501c3 organization, so if an artist collective decides to form a 501c3 organization, the taxes are completely different. 501c3s are basically operating tax-free. So that, as an individual, that doesn't mean that you wouldn't be liable for your personal compensation at that point. Again, if you're an employee of a 501c3 organization, you have to pay taxes out of your income just like anybody else. I hope that answers your question. Somebody else asked, I have been fiscally sponsored with Fractured Atlas for a documentary film project, and I marked it as temporary, but it may be expanded to an ongoing project. Can this be changed? Yes, absolutely. All you need to do is email us, and we can make that edit for you. It's not a problem. Someone else asked, I'm wondering if there would be any restriction with applying for fiscal sponsorship as someone who previously had a 501c3 organization, which I let lapse. Nope, that's not a problem for us. It depends on if you are trying to get the corporation fiscally sponsored, and if the corporation is still a 501c3, we would just want to know that. And to be honest, at that point, there's not really any reason for you to get fiscal sponsorship, but if the corporation is still in existence, but the 501c3 status has ended, that is not a problem. Someone else asked, do the artists always have to find their own donors, or do you have any general funds you can grant, for instance, to various film projects? It is up to all of our projects to find their own donors. We don't have a general fund or pool of money that we grant to our fiscally sponsored projects. Unfortunately, we don't receive any type of funding like that we can redistribute. So the sources of revenue for our projects comes from them doing the fundraising. We can coach you and help you figure out how to reach out to your network and how to find grants, but we don't hand you money that is just from a pool of money that Fractured Atlas has. I wish we could do that. It'd be nice if we had that. Somebody else asked, if I apply and get sponsorship, how long before I have to land my first donation? In other words, is there a penalty for lulls between donations? There is no penalty for lulls between donations. We have some projects that get sponsorship, and that, I think that they have intentions of fundraising right away, and sometimes they don't start for 6 months. That's not a problem for us. If you end up canceling your membership at any point in time, so those 2 levels of paid membership that I mentioned earlier, if you stop paying your membership dues, your project will end. And it's not too difficult to get it reactivated. So it's actually quite simple. We just need to confirm that the activities are still the same. So let's say you have a theater company and you have a lot of activity in the fall every year. So you need fiscal sponsorship for the summer when you're fundraising, and for the fall, maybe a little bit even into the winter, but you want to take 5 months off. We have some projects that they downgrade their membership to the community level for that 5-month period, which ends their sponsorship, meaning we can't accept donations for them during that time, and we can't release money to them during that time. But if, at the end of that time, if they wanted to come back, we would just say to them, are all of your activities the same? And if they've changed, we would just ask you to update it and resubmit a new application. It's pretty straightforward to do. Someone else asked, as a fiscally sponsored project that gets a grant from an outside organization, can we say we received a grant since Fractured Atlas is really the grantee officially? Yes, you can say that you received a grant from that funder. So while legally we are the recipient of the funds, we are the legal grantee, the funder, the foundation or grant maker usually enters into an agreement with Fractured Atlas that states we are going to give that money to your project. So they know that the ultimate recipient of those funds is your work, and they expect to be listed on your website or thanked in your program or things like that. That's sort of standard practice for the fiscal sponsorship world. Someone else asked, can you have multiple fiscally sponsored projects with Fractured Atlas? And if it is an LLC, can it be ongoing? You can't have multiple fiscally sponsored projects with Fractured Atlas under one membership. So if you're a professional member, you can only have one project. If you wanted to have multiple projects, you would have to have multiple memberships. And we ask you to do that because the administrative work for our team is fairly involved, and that is the reason that we don't allow 2 projects per membership. If your project is approved by Fractured Atlas and the legal structure of it is an LLC, it is not a problem for the activities of it to be ongoing. The next question is, if I have fiscal sponsorship with one organization for one project, can I apply to Fractured Atlas for a different project? Again, yes, you can, but you would just need to have a second membership. Regarding another question. Regarding the requirement to have a minimum of $1,000 prior to applying for grants, does that money have to have come to me directly as the individual applying for fiscal sponsorship? Or is it okay that it went to another member of the collaborative project for which I'd like to apply for further grant support? It's an international collaboration, and I need to be the lead for U.S. grants. Thank you for asking that question. I did not mention the eligibility requirement to apply for grants. If you are a project at Fractured Atlas, we do ask that you raise $1,000 before you are eligible to apply for grants through us. And the reason that we do this is because grant makers like to see that you have a history of support and that they're not going to be the first ones giving to your project. We try to be really flexible about this policy. So there are some grants out there that are specifically for seed funding or for new projects. And obviously, they probably don't care if you've raised money in the past. We treat each one of these on a case-by-case basis. So we will waive this eligibility requirement in many, many situations. If you've raised money on a crowdfunding campaign, we just ask that it's been in the last 2 years for the same project. If you've received a grant outside of Fractured Atlas, that's okay. If you've received donations outside of Fractured Atlas, that's okay. In this situation, if the donation that you've received prior to being fiscally sponsored has been specifically for the work that you are producing, it doesn't matter who actually accepted it. So if the project leader accepted it or if somebody else as part of the group accepted it, that's not what we care about. We just want to know that the money was intended for the work that you're currently fiscally sponsored for. So if you could have the donor email us and say, I gave $1,000 to X, Y, and Z project, we'll be happy to waive the eligibility requirement for you. Someone else asked, would an unincorporated association be considered an informal group for the responsible entity per the application? Yes. So the section that asks for the legal entity, your legal entity is either you as an individual sole proprietor with your social security number. It can be an informal group with an EIN number, which may be an unincorporated association. It could be an LLC, it could be a corporation, or it can be a partnership. Somebody else asked, if there is a grant application online, how can Fractured Atlas review it before it's submitted? What we ask is that if it is an online application, that it sort of depends on how the account is set up. So sometimes grant makers will ask for the 501c3's EIN number, which is the employee identification number of Fractured Atlas. In that case, if they ask for that before you can even set up an account, we ask that we set it up for you. So what that means is we'll just create the username and password for you. We'll give it to you, and then we'll ask you to enter in your information. We'll then log back in, review the whole thing, upload any documents that are needed, and then we'll submit it on your behalf. If it's a grant application that the funder does not ask for the 501c3 information in order to create the account, you can go ahead and set up the account. And then once you're ready for us to review it, you could just send us the username and password, and we'll log in and review it and upload the documents to you. Okay, a couple more questions here. Somebody asked, what if you have a project that is raising funds for a play and a movie, or a series of plays and movies? Do you need to have separate memberships? That depends on how you want to structure the project. So some of our members do have separate memberships for things like that, and some of them decide to merge them together. So it's really up to you to decide if you're okay fundraising for, let's say you come up with a name for this project or company, and you write a mission statement that it is, going to be about creating a series of plays and movies. that would be fine. And then you would use that name of that project or company to do all of your fundraising. If you feel like you really need to have the name of the play or the name of the film as the name of the fiscally sponsored project, and you need to have them as distinct separate projects for fundraising purposes, because maybe you have different audiences or people identify differently with them, that would be a reason to have two different memberships and two different projects. Someone else asked, is it fine if the contact person is not the artist, but a manager who will manage the artist's professional account? Yes, we don't have a problem with that. The only thing that we ask is that if the artist also wants to be in contact with us at any point, they should have an organizational membership, and also that you make sure that you have legally in writing who is the responsible party for those funds. So if you're hiring an outside person to manage your fiscally sponsored fund, they're the only person that can access that money. So, even if it's fundraising for you, if they are the member and they're the only member and you guys have some sort of dispute, they still own that membership and all of the funds associated with it. So we just try to make sure that you're aware of that beforehand, because we do occasionally, and fortunately rarely, have disputes come up around who owns the membership and whose funds are in the account. So just make sure that you're clear with whoever you're working with about the rights and ownership of the membership and the fiscally sponsored funds. Somebody else asked, can an international artist become a member? Yes, an international artist can be a member of Fractured Atlas. The one thing you do need to keep in mind is that in order to apply for fiscal sponsorship, you have to have a U.S. tax identification number. So that's either a Social Security number or an employee identification number. We can only fiscally sponsor those who have a tax ID, because when we release the money, it is taxable income. So you have to be able to file your taxes in the United States. Our other programs and services at Fractured Atlas do not have any restrictions in terms of international artists using those programs. The only thing to keep in mind is if you are purchasing insurance as an international artist, or if you have an international company, there could be different restrictions depending upon the type of entity that you have. Somebody else asked, what if in 2016, a small amount of funds were raised through PayPal? Can that small amount be moved to the project once it's approved? Unfortunately, we can't issue tax receipts to donors who gave directly to you. We can only issue tax receipts to donors who give directly to Fractured Atlas. And that is a restriction that the IRS puts on us as a 501c3 charity. We need to be able to prove that the donation came to us in order for the donor to claim that deduction. So there's no reason, unless we can issue a tax receipt, there's really no reason for you to have money sent to us that you've already raised outside of the fiscal sponsorship program. Somebody else asked, and this is the last question that I have for the evening. Somebody asked, can donated funds for a fiscally sponsored project be used for general operating support if the organization produces and presents live music performances, or does it have to go to the artistic product or projects only? That's a great question. We can release money for your fiscally sponsored projects general operating support. So that is, anything related to the work that you described in your project description. If the mission of your organization is to produce and present live music performances, and you need to release money to pay for your office rent to actually, organize the administrative side of it, excuse me, that is not a problem for us. We will be happy to release money for that. Excuse me, everybody. All right, well, I'm getting a lot of thank yous, so I guess that there's no more questions tonight. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know it's probably for some of you on the East Coast, I'm sure it's dinner time, and for some of you in other parts of the country and on the West Coast, I'm sure you're either finishing up work or taking time out of your busy day. So I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I will send you a recording of the webinar in the next couple of days. Thanks so much, everybody, and have a great evening.